the abuse you deserve. Crazy sex talk, bitterness, resentment, and contempt, emotional rape, hypocrites in marriage. It's not happening rapidly. The most impactful change that you could make, you allowed yourself to be in a position where that happened. And sometimes you're taken completely off guard, right? You would never know. You had no idea what I was capable of for my physical abuse, for my emotional abuse, for my sexual abuse, right? So sometimes you're taken completely off guard. But if you know our story, all right, don't leave the moment I say what the title of the episode is, but you've already read it, so you're listening. The abuse you deserve. Now, of course, no one actually deserves real abuse. I'm not saying that. But as you know, here at Morrow Marriage, welcome to the Morrow Marriage podcast, by the way. Here at Morrow Marriage, we take responsibility for ourselves, okay? And often people feel so victimized, and you often are a massive victim. And I mean that in a real sense. You shouldn't be hurt like this, okay? But I've talked about him before. James and I are going to go, our business partners, James and I are going to go live on, well, this will probably air after we've gone live actually, but we're going to go live and talk about this. And we're hoping we get some feedback from people, because there's two types of abuse, guys. There's the abuse that you give, and there's the abuse that you allow. Okay. I'm not saying you allowed somebody to, let's say, use one of the worst, punching you in the face. Okay. I'm not saying that, but you allowed yourself to be in a position where that happened. And sometimes you're taken completely off guard, right? You would never know. You had no idea what I was capable of for my physical abuse, for my emotional abuse, for my sexual abuse, right? So sometimes you're taken completely off guard. But if you know our story, you would never have done things the same way going back with the skills that you have now.
No, not even close.
No, in fact,
not even close.
Actually, I'll let you talk. Go.
I think knowing what I know now, I could have prevented a lot of what you served me. I could have circumvented our entire situation had I known how to deal with you. Now, you can't expect yourself to know how to deal with someone that shows characteristics that you've never seen before. I grew up in I grew up in a healthy home. I didn't see an unhealthy marriage. I wasn't emotionally abused, physically abused. I wasn't abused in any way as a child. I was treated fairly. My parents weren't what you'd call gentle parents, the gentle parenting thing. They weren't like that, but good parents, So going out into the real world and starting to meet people, friendships, dating, I wasn't surrounded with negative relationships. It was not my trend. And so although I had bad relationships leading up to him, it wasn't, every relationship is bad for one reason or another if it ends, right? You don't end a good thing. I did not see even a fraction of what I saw from him in anyone else. Maybe a fraction. Maybe that's not fair. But,
thanks, baby.
But mostly it was new behavior. And also it brought out sides of me that I hadn't seen before. Now, keep in mind, I am a very strong personality, and what you see is what you get with me. He talks about me being unapologetically myself. I've always been that. And I've had to work on not hurting people's feelings because I can be tactless and blunt and direct.
Same with me, right? I'm an asshole because I'm straightforward and to the point, and I don't have time for any shit.
Yeah,
right?
You don't.
And I offend a lot of people.
And right? I also need to be very, very careful. Now, I wouldn't say that I'm straight up an asshole, but there were times in my life where I didn't even know I was being as direct as I was. And so I had to work on myself. So the reason I'm saying that is because by the time I got to him, I had relationships where I had hurt other people because of how direct I am.
And even just friends.
Friends too. Yep, yes. Yep. Friends and relationships. But then put me into the mix with someone like you and how much more extreme you were than anyone else that I had ever served any shit to. And my shit exploded. And then we really got to see what was inside of me that needed to come out.
That's right.
And I say needed to come out because I would never have fixed it had it not surfaced. I didn't even know that I was capable of that level of anger and contempt and bitterness and defensiveness and resentment and anything negative. I didn't know it was in there. So looking back now, if I knew what I know now and I could go back, I would do things so much differently for myself and the way that I would treat someone else.
100%. And the reason why this is so important is let's remove the quote unquote type of abuse from the equation for a second. Okay. Because again, I want to remind you, we're not here to promote the fact that you're allowed to be hurt. Okay. But go back to the emotional rape episode. Okay. I want you to think about what you deserve is actually what you give. You've also not been perfect. There is not really anybody in the world, I dare say, that's perfect every freaking time they get into a disagreement. It's just not really that easy to do. Okay. Now, I don't know everybody in the world, so I'm sure there's lots of people who have done a great job. But I think on a whole, even if you're raised really well like Kathryn, okay, you're still going to have something inside of you that won't take shit. And when you don't take shit, whatever that level of shit it is to you, okay, for example, it wasn't as bad as it got in the beginning with Kathryn, but not a level she liked. And so she also got defensive and also fought back. We create this life of abuse that we don't want, and or we enable it. One of my DMs this week was a woman asking, and I actually reached out to you actually, but asking what to do. The first time he hit her, she let him come home right away. So first, get out. Okay. Then let him come home right away. And now I'm terrified. I want to bring him home. I'm desperate with my family together, this and that. Listen, that's what I call the E in safe reaction, where you're reacting, you're not responding, you're not leading, you're not just making decisions on you. You're enforcing a boundary, which means you're not actually enforcing it. So here's the boundary. Here's not. This man needs to do some work. He's physically harming her. It sounds, that's why I want her to go deeper with you. From what I can see in the DM, it sounds like it's situational. He's not characterological. He's not punching her on it because it's a Tuesday. He's punching her because of her, right? And again, not her fault, okay? But what has she enabled? If she's enabling him to come home after he's hit her, what is she saying as well when it happens? It doesn't give him the right to hit her. But we have to understand our part of this.
Situational domestic violence it's the fault of both. That usually it's the husband that lashes out physically and hits, but it's because of something that the wife is doing as well. Neither of them are allowed to be treating each other in that way. Definitely not the physical violence, but situational domestic violence is exactly what it sounds like. It is based on the situation. And both people are victims in situational domestic violence.
That's right. The difference would be characterological. If he's just punching her because it's a Tuesday, I think you say Monday when you teach a lesson, but if he's just doing it because it's just who he is, that's a different level of work, right? That's a totally different level of work. But for the purpose of this episode, I want you guys to think about everything. First and foremost, we don't get to decide what level of abuse is worse. That's like saying an affair is worse than a kick in the balls. How do you get to decide that? Okay.
You can decide it for yourself.
That's right.
You can't decide it for anybody else.
That's right. But which means even if you decide it for yourself, you can't say that's worse. You can't do this to me. Remember what Kathryn says. I would have rather been punched in the face than been screamed at all night long, 7 days in a row. Okay.
But if he would have slept with someone else, if we would have had physical infidelity, I don't think I would have been able to continue. So but we work with couples where they get through physical infidelity. I personally don't know if I could do it. I don't have to ever find out.
We didn't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
You know, knowing what I know now, I believe that I would still be looking exactly like how I teach it. Well, what the fuck did I do wrong? Like right now, I think I'm a pretty fucking badass dude. I think I'm pretty awesome.
You are.
Thank you. Kathryn says she'd be crazy to live without me. But if something happened like that, I have to ask myself a real fucking question. Well, how badass am I really if my wife is looking somewhere else? Okay. Hey, if you're enjoying this podcast and you've read our books, would you please head over to Amazon and leave a 5-star review? Let's take our first step as leaders and go change the world. Thanks for your help. Now, I don't believe that would happen, but none of you do. And that's the problem. You can't decide what the abuse level feels like. You can't decide what the disrespect is, how bad it is, what's worse and what. None of it matters because you're responsible for the abuse you deserve. If you are disrespectful at all, if you defend yourself, if you attack your partner, if you physically intimidate them, if you run away and hide, doesn't matter what we talk about, you're enabling a situation that is not the life that you want, which means you have a part in it. That's it. Use just words and name calling. I know that for some people, that's the worst. That's the worst. I know it sucks. No, you know, if that's all it ever was, and I was just calling her a bitch and a cunt and a hypocrite, you know, I think those are my 3 go-to, you know, like if that's all it was, count your fucking blessings, people. Okay. It's not appropriate. And yes, I've heard the expressions and the mantras, like that's like calling yourself that because you're one. And listen, at the end of the day, we don't get to decide. If your dad called you a cunt your whole life, then you probably don't want that from your wife or your husband. You don't get to decide what hurts. But how often have you also name called? And if it wasn't name calling, what is your version of it? Whenever I'm on a call with a guy, I'm like, okay, so you know my story? Yeah. So you know how abusive I was? Yeah. So there's nothing you can say that I'm going to judge you over because it's very uncommon for someone to be worse than me. Maybe the same, but very uncommon for them to be worse. Okay. And because again, I don't get to decide what's worse. If you're punching your wife and I raped my wife, who gets to decide what's different and what's worse? Okay. So I want you guys to think about it like this. If you can just appreciate that whatever you're doing to contribute, because you're not perfect too, then you can see how and why you might have been pushing buttons. How, if you didn't want them to serve you papers, why it might have happened. If you didn't want the affair to happen, why it might have happened. If you didn't want the kick, the punch, the shove, the door slammed in your face, if you didn't want to actually be punched, was there a part that you played? That's it. Start with was there? Because if you're not perfect, again, it doesn't justify, baby, I hate it when
It
people,
doesn't justify it, but even just thinking, if you're feeling defensive right now, just think about us.
Mhm.
I allowed all of that. I can look back and say, if I would have done things differently, it would not have unfolded the way that it did. So whose fault is it really? Well, it kind of sounds like it's mine, doesn't it? Now, no, of course, his abuse is not my fault. But if there were steps that could have been taken for me to circumvent or prevent that from happening, then I'm actually the one that's in control. That means that, and we're not justifying any kind of abuse.
Nope.
But if it's happening, what is it that you could take responsibility for to change your situation? Because you cannot change your partner. All you can do is influence your partner
By changing yourself.
by changing yourself.
That's it. Yeah.
That's the only thing. And I think also be careful sometimes when you read something like it says the abuse you deserve. This is what we call a hook. We want you to listen to what we have to say. I never know what's going to come out of this guy's mouth,
Mhm.
but you don't actually deserve it. So he doesn't actually mean that if you're being pushed, door slammed in your face, called a cunt, it doesn't mean that you deserve it. What he's meaning to say is you have the power to change it. If you don't change it, that's your choice. And if you choose to live in it, then I guess you have to live with it. But it doesn't mean that you've done anything to deserve it. Sometimes it
It's
scares me the way that he presents things.
it's
But he
it's
doesn't. You need. I want to make sure that they hear you and me loud and clear with this because you have the power to change it. That's what he's trying to say to you. What have you done to contribute, or what have you not done to learn and grow to get out of the situation that you're in? And getting out of the situation that you're in doesn't necessarily mean leaving. I didn't leave, but I'm nowhere near that situation anymore. Why? Because I took responsibility. And now I can look back and say, yeah, his abuse was kind of my fault. Did I deserve it? No. It's not. He doesn't mean that
and when
he's
she says
justifying his
kind of,
behavior,
and when you say kind of your fault, what she means is the part that she allowed.
which was all of it.
That's
I
what,
allowed all of it
but
because
see, there you go. Allowed, deserve. It's just a choice of words,
yeah.
right? That's why I say I don't think, first of all the other girls that cheat on me, I know exactly why that happened, at least my role in why that happened. And I mean, I would have to give Kathryn another chance, but I'd be looking at it totally different. I'd be
Mhm.
looking at it like I deserve it because obviously I wasn't doing a great job. Here I am talking about levels of intimacy and safety and all this stuff. If it got to that part, then I would feel very victimized. I would feel very hurt and very abused after all this work and everywhere we came to. And I don't believe this would ever happen. But if it did, I would have to think, well, did I deserve it?
Mm.
Because if I'm enabling it, if I'm allowing, if I am not inspiring, as she used, or I'll say leading, as I would use, then I do deserve it. Just like broke people. If you desire Netflix and scrolling on social media instead of looking at YouTube and at least learning how to make money for free, if you don't try hard, then you do deserve to be broke. Like you have to look at it just more clearly, more cut and dry, taking responsibility for yourself. Okay. And then, of course, I'll remind you and reiterate because this is such a sensitive topic.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean you actually deserve to be abused. It
No.
doesn't. But I want you to flip the word deserve then and go to allow,
And then don't allow
enabled,
it.
and then don't allow. She stopped the abuse. Okay. Was it
I wasn't the
fast?
one doing it, and I stopped it.
That's right.
That's how powerful this is, and
That's
this is
right.
the point that he's trying to make.
Mhm.
Whatever percentage you are, whether you are the bad one or you're the one that's not so bad, you need to own your own shit so that you can change it to get out of the situation that you're in
Mhm.
without leaving your marriage.
Yeah,
Unless it's characterologically, domestically violent, and then I think that you need to get out.
and by the way, if that's something you're going through, I can work with a man like that. He needs to be ready. And typically that's going to be rock bottom.
Mhm.
That's it. There's just no other way. He's going to have to be losing it all. It's going to take him a little bit of reflection. Then all of a sudden he's going to need help and he's going to want to do it. Does it always work? Only if he invests. I'll tell you that. Every free guy that I've tried to help with that, I was going to give a number, but I don't know if I'd be right. Maybe half a dozen. Okay. The guys that are straight up beating their wife, guys who've been to jail for it, not just restraining orders and things like that. Unless they invest, they don't do anything about it. it doesn't last very long. They
don't do the work.
They need a rock bottom, and B, and I know that's a very small case study, but think about why we're not getting too many of those men coming to the website either, right?
Yeah, we don't get
them. They don't come because they don't want to admit that. They don't want to do the work. It's a lot more work, because it's characterological. Okay. So if you understand it, if you're in that situation, you might have to leave. You might have to create a different rock bottom. You might have to force them into better reflection, and then they're going to have to invest, or else they won't take it serious. And that's a shitty realization. But the flip side is this, and
characterological domestic violence is different than what we're describing.
Yes.
There's you don't allow characterological domestic violence. This is something that happens to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not two victims in this situation. It's one victim and one antagonist. So you call it?
Yes.
So it's one good guy, one bad guy. And it doesn't mean that the good guy has nothing to fix, but when it comes to the violence, it's, you might get the shit beat out of you for leaving an egg on the counter. Like it has nothing to do with two victims. It has nothing to do with anything that you did to
there's something else going on.
It's different than what he's describing.
I mean, even if you look at us, like I was situational. I was going to get what I wanted with my wife, but
and I was acting like a cunt. Again, rewind. If I rewind back, I got so defensive.
I was going to say something different. So if you think about it, here's the abuse in the bedroom that is not her fault and she does not deserve, but allowed. She also let me come in. She would be there she would open herself up for me so I could do it. Sometimes that made me think I could just do it whenever I wanted. Okay. She said, you can have me whenever you want. Maybe it was out of fear. That's what she had to stop enabling it. Mm-hmm. That's why I say the abuse you deserve. If you just take responsibility for yourself, guys, you don't know the power that you have.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll see you next time.
Bye.